5 Grim Stories for Christmas. Number 1. The Forgotten Ritual. It all started with an abandoned house on the outskirts of town. For years, it sat empty, hidden behind overgrown trees and broken fences. To most, it was just an eyesore, but for 4 friends, Emily, Jason, Sarah, and Mark, it was the perfect place to explore. On a rainy afternoon, they decided to see if the rumors of the haunted house were true. Inside, the house smelled of mildew and rot. The floorboards creaked with every step. It was Jason who found the diary, tucked away in a dusty drawer. Its leather cover was cracked, and the pages were yellowed with age. The diary belonged to a woman named Eleanor, and it described a ritual meant to protect the house from evil. Curiosity got the better of them. They gathered candles, chalk, and the other items listed in the diary. That night, they returned to the house to perform the ritual. As they drew symbols on the floor and lit the candles, the air grew colder. Emily read aloud from the diary, her voice trembling. Then, the wind outside stopped completely. Silence. Too much silence. At first, nothing happened. But then, the candles flickered wildly. A low hum filled the room, rising into an ear-piercing screech. Out of the shadows, it emerged. A faceless figure, its form human-like, but featureless. Its presence was suffocating, and the friends froze in terror. It moved toward them, its featureless head tilting as if studying them. Panic set in. Mark screamed, breaking the silence, and the entity lunged. They scattered, running through the house, but the figure was always one step ahead. No matter where they turned, it was there, blocking their escape. Its movements were unnatural, as if it glided rather than walked. In their desperation, they stumbled into the basement, slamming the door shut behind them. The air was thick and damp. Emily held the diary tightly, flipping through its pages for a way to banish the entity. But the writing had changed. The instructions were gone, replaced by a single chilling sentence. You invited it. Now it stays. The candles they had brought flickered to life on their own, surrounding them in a circle of light. The entity's form appeared in the darkness, more menacing than ever. It reached out, and the friends screamed. But just as it was about to strike, the first rays of dawn pierced through the cracks in the basement's walls. The figure dissolved into the shadows, leaving only the sound of their ragged breathing. They never spoke of that night again. The house was boarded up, and the diary was burned. But even now, they'll tell you, something still lingers there, waiting for the next group of curious souls to summon it. Number 2. The Midnight Caller. It was just another quiet night in Rachel's small apartment. She had grown used to the solitude, the ticking of the clock, and the occasional hum of passing cars outside. But that night, something changed. At precisely 3:33 a.m., her phone rang. Rachel answered the phone reluctantly. There was no caller ID, just an unending silence on the other end. Then, a faint, distorted voice whispered her name, Rachel. She hung up immediately, her heart pounding. But deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. The next night, the call came again. This time, the voice was louder, clearer. It described her apartment in unsettling detail, the color of her curtains, the book she had left open on the coffee table. Panic set in. She checked the locks and peered through the blinds, but no one was there. By the third night, the voice became more menacing. It began predicting events before they happened. In 5 minutes, the power will go out, it whispered. And just as Rachel began to dismiss it, the room plunged into darkness. She was no longer sure what was real and what wasn't. Rachel reached out to the police, but the calls couldn't be traced. She changed her number, yet the calls continued. At 3:33 a.m., without fail, the phone would ring. The voice began revealing secrets about her past. things only she could know. The boundaries between her memories and the stranger's knowledge began to blur. One night, the voice gave her an ultimatum. Open the door, or I'll come in anyway. The words sent a chill down her spine. The doorknob began to rattle. Terrified, she backed away, clutching her phone as the voice laughed. Then, the phone screen went black. When the sun rose, Rachel was gone. Her apartment was eerily silent, the phone lying shattered on the floor. The only sign she had been there was the faint imprint of her presence and the lingering dread that something was watching, waiting for its next victim. To this day, no one knows what happened to Rachel. Some say she left town, unable to cope with the terror. Others believe she was taken by whatever called her every night. But one thing is certain, the phone calls didn't stop. They just moved on to someone else. Number 3. The Vanishing Hotel. It was a night much like any other, except for the storm. Thick rain pelted against the windshield as Tom and Lisa drove along a deserted highway. The map app had failed them hours ago, and the gas gauge was dangerously close to empty. Just as desperation set in, they spotted it. A grand, illuminated hotel standing alone amidst the darkness. The lobby was opulent, almost too perfect. Chandeliers sparkled above, and the scent of polished wood lingered in the air. A smiling clerk greeted them, her demeanor unsettlingly calm given the storm raging outside. "Welcome," she said. "You'll find everything you need here." The couple exchanged wary glances but decided to stay. After all, they had little choice. Their room was on the top floor. As they walked through the hallways, something felt wrong. The air seemed heavier, the silence oppressive. Each door they passed looked identical, as though the hallway stretched on forever. Tom thought he saw a shadow move beneath one door, but when he looked again, it was gone. The room was immaculate, yet devoid of personality. There were no paintings on the walls, no signs of previous guests. Lisa noticed the clock by the bed. It wasn't working. "Probably a dead battery," Tom said. But as they unpacked, the clock suddenly ticked to life. 3:33 a.m. The chime echoed unnaturally, and they both froze. Tom woke up to find Lisa gone. The bed was cold, and her belongings were missing. Panicked, he ran to the lobby, but it was empty. The chandeliers no longer sparkled, and the front desk was abandoned. Outside the glass doors, the storm had vanished, replaced by an endless gray void. Desperate to find Lisa, Tom wandered through the hallways, but they twisted and turned in impossible ways. Rooms that had been there moments ago disappeared. He burst through a final door, only to find himself outside. When he turned around, the hotel was gone. All that remained was an empty field under a gray sky. Weeks later, Tom learned he wasn't alone in his experience. Others had encountered the Vanishing Hotel, but their stories always ended the same. One person missing, the other left to tell the tale. No one knew where the hotel came from or why it chose its victims. And to this day, some say it still appears to those who wander too far off the beaten path. So, the next time you're driving down an empty road and see a hotel glowing in the distance, think twice before stopping. Because once you check in, you may never leave. Number 4. The Whispering Woods. In the quiet village of Ravenswood, the woods were more than just trees and shadows. They whispered secrets, drawing people in with a voice so faint it was easy to dismiss. But those who ventured too far never returned. The villagers warned of the cursed forest, but some couldn't resist the pull. That's how 4 friends found themselves at its edge one cold, moonlit night. The 4 friends Mia, Jake, Claire, and Ryan laughed nervously as they crossed into the forest. The air changed immediately, colder and heavier. The whispers started softly, like leaves rustling in the wind. But these whispers carried words, their names, spoken in voices that sounded familiar, yet wrong. They came to a clearing where the ground was bare and lifeless. In the center stood an ancient tree, its bark blackened and twisted. Strange symbols were carved into it, glowing faintly. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. Claire reached out to touch the tree, and the forest seemed to shudder. As Claire's fingers grazed the tree, the whispers turned to screams. The friends tried to run, but the forest changed around them. Paths twisted and disappeared, trees closed in, and the mist thickened, carrying with it the faces of those who had vanished before. They weren't alone anymore. Jake was the first to disappear. One moment he was behind Mia, and the next he was gone. His voice echoed through the forest, pleading for help. But when they followed the sound, they found only his flashlight, flickering weakly on the forest floor. The whispers mocked them now, mimicking his cries. In their panic, they stumbled back into the clearing. The tree was different now. Faces pressed against its bark, screaming silently. Claire realized the truth. The forest didn't just kill those who entered. It absorbed them, their souls trapped within the ancient tree. And it was hungry. One by one, the forest claimed them. Only Mia remained, clutching a piece of bark from the cursed tree. She whispered a desperate apology before plunging it into the ground. For a brief moment, the whispers stopped, and the forest went still. Then, darkness consumed everything. Mia was never seen again. The villagers say the whispers grew quieter after that night, but they never stopped. And the tree? It still stands, waiting for the next curious soul to hear its call. Number 5. The Mirror Room. It was supposed to be a fresh start. Sophie, a struggling artist, found the perfect studio to rekindle her creativity. Tucked away on the top floor of an old building, the room was spacious, quiet, and oddly affordable. There was just one strange feature, an entire wall lined with antique mirrors. On her first night, Sophie set up her easel facing the mirrors. As she worked, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The mirrors reflected her movements, but every so often, they seemed slower, like her reflection was hesitating. She told herself it was just her imagination. A week passed, and Sophie grew used to the room's peculiarities. But one night, as she cleaned her brushes, she noticed something chilling. Her reflection in the largest mirror wasn't cleaning brushes. It was staring directly at her, unmoving. That night, Sophie dreamed of the mirror room. In her dream, her reflections moved independently, stepping out of the mirrors and surrounding her. They whispered things she couldn't understand, their faceless forms twisting unnaturally. Sophie woke up in a panic, only to find the largest mirror cracked. She swore she hadn't touched it. But worse, her reflection in the crack wasn't her. It was smiling, a wide, unnatural grin that didn't match her own terror. Desperate, Sophie researched the building's history. She discovered the room once belonged to an eccentric collector obsessed with mirrors. He believed mirrors could trap souls and tried to harness their power. The more she read, the more the mirrors seemed to hum, as if alive. Determined to escape, Sophie decided to destroy the mirrors. She swung a hammer at the largest one, but as the glass shattered, the room erupted in chaos. Her reflection spilled out, faceless and enraged, pulling her toward the fragments. Sophie screamed as her reflection, the grinning one, stepped into her place. Sophie was never seen again. Months later, a new artist moved into the studio. They admired the antique mirrors, now repaired and gleaming, unaware of the faint, twisted grin that watched them from the largest one. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the shadows with the Mirror Room, the Whispering Woods, the Vanishing Hotel, the Midnight Caller, and the Forgotten Ritual. Each tale reminds us that the line between reality and horror is thinner than we think. these stories sent a shiver down your spine. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Whispers in the Dark. Stay tuned for more chilling tales that will keep you up at night. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.